and invited me to perform a beautiful song that allowed my voice to travel the world. So for Yusuf Islam, thank you so much for this amazing song.
Praise for Allah, nothing but Allah. Praise the beginning of Bismillah. Praise for taqwa, bewaring of Allah. And thanks for thawab, a reward. Praise for Jannah, the garden of paradise. Praise for Hajj, the blessed pilgrimage. Praise for Khatam, the seal of the prophethood given to the prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Days for Deen al-Islam, religion with Allah since time began. Days for dhikr, remembering Allah, and rise for the month of Ramadan. Oh, Ramadan. Zais for zakat to cure our greed when we give our money to those in need. Sais for salamun alaykum, peace be with you, wa alaykum salam. Sha'is for Shams, the shining sun, which Allah placed for everyone. And Sais for Salah, for when we pray, facing Him, every day facing Him, till we meet our Lord Allah. There's only one God and Muhammad is His messenger. Allah, la ilaha illallah. Boys for duha, the morning light, the sun has turned from red to white. Boys for tariq, a path to walk upon. And Ba is for dhil, a shadow, and A is for ilam, the thing to know, to make our knowledge grow in Islam. Gha is for ghaib, a world unseen, and that we know is not a dream. And Fa is for the opening, Al-Fatiha. And
Assalamu alaikum. We are almost about to start. There are some people that have entered from the back door and they haven't registered yet. No? So those who haven't registered, the registration is on that side, inshallah. So we're almost ready to start, inshallah.
What's Yunus? Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. A very good morning. And in South Africa, goeiemorgen, molweni, and shalom. So we want to welcome all our international delegates, our special VIP guest today, and of course, all our respected, illustrious speakers from different parts of the world, from Russia, from China, from Greece, from Ireland, and from Turkey, from Palestine. Alhamdulillah, we're extremely fortunate. So we start the proceedings, and we'll call upon the director of Al-Quds Foundation South Africa to give the official dua and welcome to all our delegates and the participants in today's Palestine conference. We call upon Sheikh Ibrahim. Jazakallah khairah.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of Allah, God Almighty, wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and may the peace and blessings be on His holy Prophet, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. All praise and thanks are due to God Almighty Allah, Lord of the worlds and Creator and Sustainer of each and every living being and each and every human being. Innahu sharafun li an urahiba bikum. It gives me great honor and privilege to welcome you to our conference titled Freedom for Palestine. And we firmly believe that freedom is close by. اسمحوا لي أن أقول لكم أهلا وسهلا ومرحبا بكم إلى مدينة رأس الرجاء الصالح. Welcome to the city of Good Hope and welcome to the castle of Good Hope. مرحبا إلى أبعد مدينة في قارة أفريقيا. Welcome to the furthest city of Africa. إن مدينة كيب تاون معروف أنها من أجمل المدن في العالم. Cape Town is known as one of the most beautiful cities in the world. وبمجيئكم إليها قد زادها الله جمالا وبركة ونورا. But with your coming here to Cape Town, Allah has increased Cape Town with beauty, with blessings, and with nur. لضيوفنا الكرام, to our international guests, جنوب أفريقيا بلدكم, South Africa is your country. فأهلا وسهلا ومرحبا بكم. So be part of our family. أهلا comes from the word أهل, family. So you are part of the family of South Africa. And because you're part of a family, sahlan, take it easy, be comfortable, and welcome a million times. وجزاكم الله خيرا لجهودكم وسعيكم لقضية الأقصى وفلسطين. And we thank you for all your sacrifices and efforts that you do for Palestine and for the third most sacred mosque in the world, مسجد الأقصى. قضية فلسطين ليست قضية أهل فلسطين فقط، وإنما هي قضية البشرية جمعاء. The issue of Palestine is not only the responsibility of the Palestinian people, but it is the responsibility and duty of humanity at large. وقضية الأقصى المبارك ليست قضية أهل فلسطين، وإنما قضية كل مؤمن. And the issue of Masjid al-Aqsa is not only, once again, the issue and the responsibility of the people of Palestine, but it is the responsibility of each and every believer. أيها الأحباء، ما قمنا بهذا المؤتمر للعب أو الراحة أو ضياء الوقت. My dear ones, we haven't staged this conference here in Cape Town to play around and to come and rest and to waste time. ولكن جئنا, but we came here لنتشاور ونتدارس كيف نحارب هذا العدو الغاشم. But we came together to discuss with one another and consult with one another and make research of how we're going to fight this brutal and oppressive enemy. Sheikh Raid Salah, one of the great leaders of humanity from Palestine, when he came to Cape Town, one of his slogans was, "Intaha waqtu nawm," the time for sleep is over. And it is worthwhile to be repeated, the time for sleep is over. وَنَحْنُ نَقُولُ الآن, and we are saying now, and we add, وَقَدْ بَدَأَ وَقْتُ الْجِهَادِ, and the time for jihad has started. So in conclusion, on behalf of Al-Quds Foundation South Africa, on behalf of the Muslim Judicial Council, on behalf of all the people of Cape Town and South Africa, we welcome you and we honor you and we appreciate you and we love you all dearly for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And may Allah grant that our one-day conference here today is going to be a great success, and our conference today is going to contribute to the ultimate freedom of the people of Palestine. Al-Fatiha. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salamu ala ashrafil mursaleen. Sayyidina wa habibina Muhammadin sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Allahumma aftah alayna ya Allah futuh al-arifin. Warzuqna fahm al-nabiyyin. اللهم أغننا بالعلم وزينا بالحلم وأكرمنا بالتقوى وجملنا بالعافية ووفقنا يا الله لما تحب وترضى يا رب العالمين. اللهم إنا نسألك يا الله من خير ما في هذا اليوم فتحه ونصره ونوره وبركته يا مولانا يا رب العالمين. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وأصحابه وبارك وسلم. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.
Say Jazakallah Khaira to Sheikh Ibrahim, the director of Al-Quds Foundation South Africa, for the welcome, official welcome, and the opening dua, prayer for this particular conference on Palestine, freedom for Palestine. We now call upon the head of the Hayat Ulama Palestine, the Council of Ulama of Palestine in Turkey, the Honorable Dr. Nawaf Takruri, to deliver his opening remarks. And I call upon Sheikh Ihsan Talib to assist with the interpretation. Shukran.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين، وعلى جميع الأنبياء والمرسلين، وعلى كل وصحب كل أجمعين. حياكم الله أيها الإخوة الكرام، وأنتم في هذا البلد الذي قال الشيخ إبراهيم أنه بعيد، ولكنه ثبت أنه أقرب إلى غزة وإلى الأقصى وإلى فلسطين من عمان ومن القاهرة ومن دمشق ومن عواصم دولنا العربية.
Our respected guest, Dr. Nawaf Takruri, introduces his talk by extending first and foremost praises and thanks to the Almighty Creator. Thereafter also on the leader and the foremost exemplar of humankind, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And thereafter extending his greetings and his expressions of goodwill to each and everybody present here this morning. Hayyakumullah to each and every one. Dr. Nawaf references the introduction of Sheikh Ibrahim Gabriel's, in which he said that this country of ours is close to Palestine, and though it is far situated on the southern or the furthest tip of Africa, yet it is closer than the countries that are neighboring Palestine. It is closer than Amman, it is closer than Egypt, it is closer than the Gulf states in the proximities of Palestine.
القرب والبعد أيها الإخوة والأخوات ليس بالمسافات ولا بالأميال، إنه بالمواقف. فإن أهل هذا البلد الكريم جنوب أفريقيا قد وقفوا الموقف الإنساني الأصيل قيادة وشعبا مسلمين ومسيحيين تجاه هذه القضية العادلة. لذلك هم أقرب إلى فلسطين وإلى بيت المقدس من كثير ممن خذلوه في ساعة الشدة.
And the issue of distance, the issue of closeness, proximity, or distance is not about miles. It's not about spatial distance. It's about positions, and it's about taking stands within the ethical framework of human beings. And if we look at the South African society, South Africans as their citizens, South Africans as the government, none of them across the globe have taken the position of proximity and support compared to that of the government and the people of South Africa. They have stood head above shoulders. They have taken unprecedented stances in support of the cause of Palestine.
خياركم هو الخيار الحق، وهو الخيار الصحيح، وهو الخيار المنتصر بإذن الله تعالى، لأن الحق غالب. لا شك أن هنالك عقبات وصعاب في الطريق، وأن ذات الشوكة هي خيارنا، ولكننا سننتصر على هذا العدو مهما دعمته أمريكا والغرب، فسننتصر عليه بالحق بإذن الله تعالى. وسوف كما حررتم من العنصرية جنوب أفريقيا، سنحرر فلسطين من الصهيونية بإذن الله تعالى. وسوف تحتفون وتجتمعون في باحات الأقصى وفي القدس وغزة وحيفا وعكا كما تجتمعون هنا نصرة للحق بإذن الله تعالى.
And so the stances and the choices that you've made are choices of justice, choices of truth. And so with those will come great responsibility and great challenges and great threats. Those who stand with truth and justice will be opposed. Those who stand for justice will find the wrath of those who counter and stand against justice. But your cause and our cause is one cause. And so as you have been liberated from your injustice and tyranny under the apartheid regime and under colonialism, so too we believe firmly that our liberation is imminent. So too we believe firmly that we will achieve our justice in the cause of the people of Palestine.
صحيح أننا اليوم نودع قائدا مجاهدا يحيى السنوار رئيس المكتب السياسي لحركة حماس، ولكننا نودعه على وجه عزيز كريم يحمل سلاحه ويرتدي زيه ويواجه عدوه، يضمد جراحه كما أي جندي، وهذه علامات النصر. بغض النظر أن يمضي قائد وقادة إلى رضوان الله وإلى جناته، فهذا هو الطريق. مضى حمزة ومضى القادة عبد الله بن رواحة وجعفر بن أبي طالب وزيد بن حارثة وفي مؤتة، ولكن كان ختامها النصر بإذن الله تعالى، بل قرار إن شاء الله. هذا هو طريقنا، طريق الجهاد، فنحن مع عدو لا يفهم إلا لغة القوة. لقد
And as we, however, today bid farewell to the foremost leaders of the resistance, we bid farewell to of our great leaders in this cause. It is noteworthy that as we bid farewell to him, we bid farewell to him whilst he had been on the front lines of the resistance, on the front lines of the resistance against the occupation and the genocide. He stood side by side with those who occupied the defense against the occupation, the resistance against the occupation. So he carried his weapons, he carried even his apparel and his uniforms of military engagement, And as he carried himself, he carried also his injuries that he sustained that took him onto the path of martyrdom. And so as we stand here, we are certain that the leadership will continue. The leadership will be replaced by others, but the cause and the process will continue.
سنة كاملة، بل دخلنا في السنة الثانية على طوفان الأقصى الذي مرغ فيه هؤلاء المجاهدون وهؤلاء الأبطال، كتائب القسام وسرايا القدس وألوية الناصر صلاح الدين وكل المجاهدين مرغوا أنف هذا الكيان في التراب، كسروا هيبته وأظهروا حقيقته، لا حقيقته العسكرية فقط وأنه يقتل الأطفال والنساء، ولكن أيضا بينوا وأظهروا للعالم هشاشة هذا العدو وضعفه، وأنه عاجز عن طرح الحقيقة وعن مواجهة الحق إلا بتدمير المستشفيات والمساجد، فلا مشروع لديه ولا قدرة إلا أن عندما يعجز عن أن يحقق أهدافه وأن يدمر غزة بكاملها.
And so the resistance and all of its components that fight the occupation, that fight the genocide, for the past year and into the second year now since the Tufan al-Aqsa or the al-Aqsa flood, have been resolute, have been committed to the cause of fighting the entity, of fighting the occupation, this illegal entity. And whilst it tried to present itself as a force of morality, what has become clear is that all that it is interested in is the complete and total annihilation of the people of the Gaza, children, women, and the cause by the resistance components is absolutely clear. They will continue to withstand, they will continue to resist until liberation is achieved.
نحن نعلم أيها الإخوة أن طريق الحرية مكلف وأن هنالك صعاب، ولكنه غير مستحيل، ولكنه وعد الله. فإذا جاء وعد الآخرة ليسوءوا وجوهكم وليدخلوا المسجد كما دخلوه أول مرة وليتبروا ما علوا تتبيرا، هذا علو الكيان اليوم وإمداده يتبره أهلنا بصمودهم بثباتهم. أما التضحيات فهي طريقنا. الشعب الفيتنامي عندما أراد أن يتحرر من العدوان الأمريكي قدم التضحيات، الجسام والملايين الذين قدمهم دفاعا عن أرضه. الشعب الجزائري طريق التحرر مكلف، ولكن لا سبيل إلا هذه الكلفة، فإذا لم يكن إلا الأسنة مركبا فما حيلة المضطر إلا ركوبها.
And so we are fully aware and cognizant, and we believe that liberation and achieving freedom is a path of struggle. It is a path of difficulty and hardship. That is the reality. And that this is not going to be an easy achievement, but this is the reality of liberation. This is the reality of attaining freedom. It's like what was experienced also by the people of Vietnam when they wanted to liberate themselves. They had to experience, and many other people across the globe, they had to experience difficulty. They had to experience sacrifice. But this is the nature. This is the road that we have chosen, the road of sacrifice. And the tadhiyah that we are willing to undertake is to achieve our ultimate goal.
لن يكون أقصانا صهيونيا ولا كنيسة القيامة، ولن يكون لهذا العدو على أرضنا استقرار ما دام فينا أحياء، ما دام في شعبنا وفي أمتنا من أمثال السنوار وهنية وتلاميذهم وهؤلاء المجاهدين، فسنبقى نقاتل حتى نستعيد أرضنا ومقدساتنا، وهذا ليس خيار بل هو الخيار الوحيد.
And so our cause that we are on and the choices that we have made is in order to retain and to defend our existence and our identity. Al-Aqsa will not become Zionist or Jewish. The Holy Sepulchre will not become Zionist or Jewish. It will remain and retain under our cause of resistance and fighting for justice and liberation. It will remain. And so, as our sacrifices had been registered by As-Sinwar, by Al-Haniya, and those who come after them of their students and those who have learnt at their feet, so we will continue with this cause, and this cause will not be stopped.
وأنتم يا أهلنا، حتى لا أطيل عليكم وقد أطلت وأنا أخذ وقتا مضاعفا، أقول لكم كونوا معنا ونحن معكم يا أهلنا في جنوب أفريقيا، يا أهل العدل، يا أهل المواقف الإنسانية الأصيلة، كونوا معنا ونحن معكم، وسوف ننتصر بإذن الله تعالى جميعا، ويكون هذا النصر من أول البلاد التي يهدى إليها جنوب أفريقيا لمواقفها الشجاعة ولمواقفها الأصيلة. ونسأل الله سبحانه وتعالى أن نلتقي في بيت المقدس محتفين بالنصر كما نلتقي الآن ندعو إلى حرية بيت المقدس، فهي الآن دعوة وغدا احتفاء وحقيقة بإذن الله تعالى. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
As the Sheikh says in conclusion, we ask the people of South Africa to remain with us and to stay with us. And we are with you, and we ask you to continue with us. And this is what will strengthen us and fortify us towards our liberation. Today, this is a call. Tomorrow, it will be a reality. We are confident that we will achieve this liberation. And South Africa and those who support us will be from the first people whom we dedicate our liberation to. And so be with us and continue with us whilst we struggle on our path to liberation and justice.
Barakallahu feek, mashallah. We thank Dr. Nawaf for a very inspiring talk and to remind us of our own history that is connected with Palestine. We now have the honor to call upon the president of the MJC to also deliver for us a message of support for this particular conference. We call upon Sheikh Riyad Fattar.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن سيدنا وحبيبنا ومولانا محمدًا صلى الله عليه وسلم عبده ورسوله. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. طلب مني أن أرحب بكم من ناحية مجلس القضاء الإسلامي. فأيها الحضور الكريم وتم الالتزام بجميع البروتوكولات، نلتقي اليوم في مهرجان فلسطين، وهو مناسبة عظيمة نجتمع فيها لنحتفل بثقافتنا وبتاريخنا وبروح الصمود التي تميز شعبنا الفلسطيني العظيم. إن هذا المهرجان ليس فقط مجرد احتفال بالتراث والفنون، بل هو رسالة للعالم أجمع أن فلسطين حاضرة في قلوبنا، وأننا مهما كانت الصعاب والتحديات لن ننسى عرضنا ولن نتنازل عن حقنا. وكما قلنا في المسيرات، كلنا فلسطينيون. قال سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه العزيز بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم: سبحان الذي أسرى بعبده ليلا من المسجد الحرام إلى المسجد الأقصى الذي باركنا حوله لنريه من آياتنا إنه هو السميع البصير. إن المسجد الأقصى الذي بارك الله حوله يرمز إلى قدسية أرض فلسطين التي كانت وستبقى أرضاً مباركة وأمانة في أعناق المسلمين جميعاً. ولا شك أن الصمود والدفاع عن هذه الأرض هو من أعظم الأعمال التي يدعو إليها الإسلام. في هذا اليوم نحتفل بإرثنا الغني الذي يعبر عن هوية شعبنا من أشعار وأزياء ومأكولات إلى حكايات الأجداد التي تذكرنا بقوة وصلابة الشعب الفلسطيني. إن ثقافتنا ليست مجرد ماد نحتفظ به، بل هي حاضر حي ومستقبل مشرق نبنيه كل يوم رغم كل الظروف. وقد قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم: لا تزال طائفة من أمتي يقاتلون على الحق ظاهرين إلى يوم القيامة. صحيح مسلم. ونحن على يقين أن هذه الطائفة الظاهرة على الحق هي أهل فلسطين الذين يدافعون عن أرضهم، يعني أرضنا ومقدساتنا، ولن يغلبوا ما داموا ثابتين على الحق. إن مهرجان فلسطين هو تجسيد لقضيتنا العادلة والصرخة في وجه الظلم، وتأكيد على أن الشعب الفلسطيني لن ينكسر. فمن خلال هذا المهرجان نثبت للعالم أن فلسطين ليست مجرد أرض محتلة، بل هي حضارة متجذرة وتاريخ طويل من النضال والصمود. نقول للعالم: نحن هنا نحتفل بحياتنا، نحمل قضيتنا في قلوبنا، ونستمر في نضالنا حتى يتحقق حلمنا في الحرية والاستقلال. وإننا على يقين أن اليوم الذي نعود فيه إلى أرضنا الحبيبة قريب بإذن الله سبحانه وتعالى، مصداقا لقوله تعالى: ولينصرن الله من ينصره إن الله لقوي عزيز. ختاما، نرحب بجميع الحاضرين ونشكر كل من سيشارك في هذا المهرجان، وأدعو الله أن يحفظ فلسطين وشعبها وأن يمن علينا بالنصر والحرية قريبا إن شاء الله سبحانه وتعالى. For the benefit of those in English, I'll quickly go through the English of what I had said. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful. All praise is due to Allah, and peace and blessings be upon the messenger and his family and companions. Honorable audience, all protocols observed. We gather today at the Palestinian festival, and like Sheikh Ibrahim had said, freedom for Palestine. A great occasion in which we come together to celebrate our culture, our history, and the spirit of resilience that distinguishes our great Palestinian people. This festival is not merely a celebration of heritage and arts, but it is a message to the whole world that Palestine is present in our hearts. And that no matter how great the hardships and challenges, we will not forget our land, and we will never give up our right. For we, as we say in our protest marches, we are all Palestinian. By the millions, by the billions, we are all Palestinians. By the millions, by the billions, we are all Palestinians. By the millions, by the billions, we are all Palestinians. I remind you of the ayah that I had quoted, the verse I had quoted in the Holy Quran was Surah Al-Isra, ayah number 1. And the English part of that is, exalted is he who took his servant by night from Al-Masjid Al-Haram to Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa. With surroundings we have blessed to show him of our signs. Indeed, he is the hearing, the seeing. Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa, whose surroundings Allah has blessed, symbolizes the sanctity of the land of Palestine, which has been and will always remain a blessed land, and a trust upon the shoulders of all Muslims and all of the free world. There is no doubt that standing firm and defending this land is one of the greatest deeds that Islam calls for. On this day, we celebrate our rich heritage, we express the identity of our people, whether it be from poverty, clothing, food, to the stories of our ancestors that reminds us of the strength and perseverance of the Palestinian people. Our culture is not merely a past that we preserve, but it is a living present and a bright future that we build every day despite all the circumstances. The Messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sallallahu alayhi wa sallam had said, a group of my ummah will continue to fight for the truth, prevailing until the day of judgment. And we are certain that this group prevailing for the truth is the people of Palestine. We defend our land and our holy sites, and they are in the trenches defending the land and the holy sites. And they will not be defeated as long as they remain steadfast in their truth. The Palestine festival that you are at is a reflection of our just cause, a cry against injustice, and a confirmation that the Palestinian people will not be broken. Through this festival, we prove to the world that Palestine is not merely an occupied land, but a deeply rooted civilization and a long history of struggle and resilience. We say to the world out there, we are here, celebrating our lives, carrying our cause in our hearts, and continuing our struggle until our dream of freedom and independence is achieved. And we are certain that the day when we return to our beloved land, which is near, by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, will be by the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah ta'ala says in Surah Al-Hajj, ayah number 40, and Allah will surely support those who support Him. Indeed, Allah is powerful, exalted in might. In conclusion, On behalf of the Muslim Judicial Council, the MGC, Majlis Al-Qada Al-Islami, we wish to welcome all to the beautiful city of Cape Town that has come, all to the conference. We thank you for your participation here in this festival. And we pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect Palestine and its people, and to grant us victory and freedom soon. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. I cannot leave this platform unless I irk the Zionists. And I again say, I am Hamas. I am Hamas. I am Hamas. Takbir.
Jazakallah khairan, Sheikh Riyad, for your inspiring talk as well. We'd like to call upon the International Director of our office in Istanbul, International Al-Quds offices, and that is none other than Director Dr. Ayman Zaidan. Jazakallah khairan.
Assalamu alaikum and good morning, everybody. Welcome. Program Director, Brother Sheikh Ibrahim Jibril, the leadership of this and the organizing committee of this Maharajan and conference, Sheikh Shahid and the wonderful devoted team who have worked day and night to bring this conference to life. Dear brothers and sisters, freedom fighters, the community of this great city, Cape Town. It is really a great honor to address you this Friday, the important day for Muslims, Jum'ah Mubarakah, Jum'at Izzin wa Nasrin, inshallah. As of this October, it marks the 6 years of passing of an icon, a freedom fighter, a Maulana, a leader, Sheikh Ihsan Hendricks, rahimahullah. Sheikh Ihsan Hendricks' legacy still resonating here in South Africa and all over the world. I take this opportunity to pay tribute to the inimitable of His Eminence Sheikh Ihsan Hendricks, who worked tirelessly establishing and founding an organization, Al-Quds Foundation. We have a witness here, Dr. Saud Abu Mahfoud, who visited South Africa 2006. At that time, we announced the establishment of Al-Quds Foundation South Africa. Everything is symbolic and iconic in South Africa. The city is symbolic, the country is symbolic. Sheikh Ihsan Hendricks is symbolic. He was a senior student in India, in Lucknow. Lucknow is symbolic. It's a place of ulama and tarbiyah and establishing leaders for the whole Muslim ummah. At that time, I am also a graduate of India. I was in Bangalore and he was in Delhi. We used to call him Ihsan. Ihsan, Harun from Thailand, Abdurrahman from Somalia, Muhammad from Kenya. Those iconic leaders, they are spreading all over the world and they are still carrying the cause of Palestine. Sheikh Ihsan, when I was in first year, he used to come for camps. He was really an inspiring leader right from the beginning, a powerful speaker, a committed fighter for freedom, a profound wasati understanding of Islam, rahimullah. The legacy of Sheikh Ihsan still resonates here in South Africa. A new generation of activists is building from his legacy to counter the 21st century's genocide and ethnic cleansing. We should not let it go like that. We should organize it to make it eternal. The legacy of Sheikh Ihsan Hendricks, I call brothers here in South Africa to establish an academy after his name. Academy to build leaders and activists for Jerusalem, to establish a waqf to حتى يخلد في الدنيا والآخرة, to be eternal in this life and the hereafter. Here in South Africa, we have different icons. Nelson Mandela, that 21st century icon who fought for freedom, and they achieved the freedom of South Africa. Mr. Mandela, Chief Mandela, was supposed to be here today with us, but he is touring the world, talking about Palestine, mobilizing for the freedom for Palestine. Our friend, brother, and comrade, Mr. Mandela, we meet him on and on in Istanbul, everywhere. Before 2 months, I met with him in Ankara. We visited the Speaker of the Parliament, and he had a wonderful presence and speech. So South Africa, Cape Town, the nation, the country, the heritage, everything is symbolic and iconic. Ladies and gentlemen, as we meet today in South Africa, the nation that endured the long and painful path for justice and freedom, a similar struggle of honor marks its 104th anniversary in Palestine. Since the first uprising for freedom took place in Jerusalem in April 1920, one whole year of genocide war that has been launched on Gaza by the Zionist occupation and is expanding today towards the West Bank and Lebanon. As we stand here together today at the beginning of the works of this conference, Freedom for Palestine Conference and Mahrajan, I find it indispensable to start with the following. First, we have lost yesterday a man of honor, Yahya al-Sinwar, who stood for all what he called his people to stand for. He was born as a refuge in a poor camp in Gaza, spent 20 years in Israel prisons, and was released in an exchange, led his people for freedom and fought for it. He spared no effort or pain to stand against the terror of Zionist colonization. He fought like brave men should fight, and he died the way honorable men should die. Rahimahullah. We pray for his soul to be accepted by Almighty Allah as a martyr, alive in the heavens, and he deserves that. Second, during the whole year of terror, war crimes, and genocide in Palestine and today in Lebanon, it has become without any shred of doubt that Zionism is a racist, colonial, ethno-supremacist ideology that wages a war against humanity. It is not only the enemy of Palestine and Palestinians, poses a threat against the word peace, and forms a laboratory of oppressive technologies and mass spying tools. It is time now for humanity as a whole to acknowledge this. To acknowledge this reality and to impose a total boycott on Zionism as an ideology that provided the basis for horrific war crimes, and the way to achieve this should be a main focus in our discussion in this conference. Third, it has been proven against and again that all forms of resistance against the Zionist aggression on all fronts forms one of the highest manifestations of just war, a righteous war for justice and freedom in the face of the terror and tyranny of Zionist colonization. For all this history, Western colonization has stood for nothing but for quest of gold and the lust to satisfy material urges. It came to the South with tyranny of wealth and might, while the people of the South had to stand for their rights and freedom, for justice, as a main rule that should govern global politics. And you have come through all that. Today, the Palestinian resistance embodies the struggle for humanity. What makes us humans is our intellect that should guide us to distinguish what is right and just, and our sincere hearts that should lead us to stand for these highest values, no matter what the price might be. Today, the Palestinian resistance leads us to the path to restore the true meaning of humanity. It is leading our way in a struggle for civilization, not in a clash of civilizations. Demonizing the noble resistance and trying to stigmatize it with terrorism is a stain of human conscience. As it stands up today in front of a criminal genocide war, the Palestinian resistance deserves all kinds of support and solidarity. And all the attempts to besiege it or to isolate it, it must be opposed and thwarted. Fourth, as a nation who once led the way of this noble human struggle, South Africa took the initiative to stand against this criminal genocide war and brought it to the International Court of Justice and brought the Zionist occupation to the room of court in a rare incident despite Israel's rich record, as we thank South Africa today for this initiative and deeply appreciate its human, moral, political stand. We believe that this initiative is a promising starting point that should be continued, and we should build on that. Fifth, based on the above, allow me to put forward the three following initiatives for discussion in this conference and Mahrajan and in your all work in South Africa. Number one, it is time to take the stand against Zionism as a racist, ethno-supremacist colonial ideology a step further by adopting a unanimous document of total boycott and isolation, acknowledging the nature of Zionism as a threat to humanity and world peace. We should work to take measures which can isolate this regime and put it away from the world peace, as it provides the ideological basis for some of the worst crimes committed in human history, and as a source of never-ending aggression, and as a global laboratory of oppression. In this document, we suggest that all the signing political parties and NGOs will vote to complete a boycott on Zionism and Zionist state and all its institutions, be it political, economic, or cultural boycott, until this ideology is globally isolated, and at the same time, to extend hands of communication, support, and solidarity to the noble Palestinian resistance. Number two, I further suggest to build on that with a wide-reaching parliamentary initiatives across the global South to legislate new laws that impose total boycott on Zionism and the Zionist state and all forms of settlements as well, while enforcing laws that could empower all forms of resistance on all fronts at the political, financial, and cultural and academic fronts. Number three, the United States has for long been imposing the monopoly of the dollar in the global economy and is using this monopoly to blacklist, freeze, and confiscate funds worldwide in an act of piracy and theft. It is time now to stand against this piracy. It is time now to stand for this piracy. America is not capable to give behavior certificates for the world while they are involved in this genocide and war crimes. and to start Global People's Economic Forum to explore the possibilities and establish the practices that could put an end to the monopoly of US dollar. And it is possible. And to start direct exchange in local currencies. We are seeing this happening. We should not stand only for talking. We should walk the talk. We should start taking initiatives and measures that isolate regime, the colonial regime Israel. Thank you so much.
So, thank you very much. Shukran to Dr. Ayman from the International Quds Office in Turkey, Istanbul. We will now proceed to the second sector. At this point, to thank the leadership and our VIP guests for their inputs and the comments now. And we'll proceed now to the first sector of the conference, the religious sector. Call upon Dr. Rashid Omar. We have Rabbi Stephen Friedman online, and we will have Pastor Rian de Villiers to join us in front, please. And also Dr. Saoud Mahfouz. Shukran jazilan. Our moderator for this session will be Sheikh Ihsan Talib. He will continue then to oversee this session. And we will run to, we are a bit late, but we'll try to catch up.
Assalamu alaikum, good morning, Mulweni. Thank you, Mr. MC Sheikh Shahid Isu. We are starting with our first religious sector segment panel of the Freedom for Palestine conference. I wish to perhaps just remind everyone that we are running exceptionally late. So we're going to see what we're going to be able to achieve in terms of gaining time. And of course, we're also having a panelist online. So that'll be Professor Stephen Friedman, as Sheikh Shahid had indicated. And then, of course, we have our three panelists in person here. And so I think we're going to try and limit the time of our speakers. Originally, this was supposed to take place over 1.5 hours. So we are going to now be forced to make it stick to 1 hour. And so that means, with the greatest amount of respect, if we're going to have each panelist taking 15 minutes, it's going to already take us to 1 hour. And if it is therefore at all possible that we do our presentations in a 10 to 12 minute limited time slot, and then thereafter also allow some time for questions and answers. And so for me then, the responsibility would be to introduce firstly our panelists as they will be presenting. And I also welcome Dr. Abu Mahfouz, who is also present here, and we do not have him as his profile on the program. I trust that all of you are able to have access to the program. It is a, as far as I understand, an electronic one. And so all the other speakers are relatively well-known and established as South African citizens, but I will do the duty as and when their turns arise to introduce each and every one of them. If I have the cooperation of our technical team, may we start with Professor Stephen Friedman. He is ready and rearing to go. Professor Stephen Friedman is a research professor in the Faculty of Humanities at the University of Johannesburg. He has published several studies of South Africa's transition to democracy, and his current work focuses on the theory and practice of democracy. He is the author of several books, numerous chapters, and journal articles. His most recent book, Good Jew, bad Jew, racism, anti-Semitism, and the assault on meaning. Discusses the use of ostensibly anti-racist language to justify racism. Is also a media commentator on the development of South African democracy and the author of the weekly column for subscribers, Against the Tide. Without any further ado, I'm going to hand over to Professor Stephen Friedman and request humbly if he could contain his presentation between 10 and 12 minutes. Thank you very much, Professor Stephen Friedman. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thanks for the opportunity to participate, although regrettably I can only do this online because it's a busy time of the Jewish year and it wasn't possible to get to Cape Town for this particular event. It should be clear from the introduction that I'm not a rabbi, although I do preach and I do teach Judaism at a congregation. There was once talk that I might become a rabbi, but then they discovered my views on Palestine and they withdrew the offer. So it's as somebody who practices the Jewish religion and observes the Jewish religion that I'm speaking to you today, but also, of course, as you heard from the introduction, as a scholar and academic who tries to understand how human beings can be free. And it's that context that I want to suggest to you, we've heard from the introductory speeches that the object of this conference is to talk about how Palestine can be free. That one of the factors, not the main factor, but a factor in the struggle to free Palestine, is the fact that there is an increasing gap between the Jewish religion and what the Zionists are doing in Palestine. Now, the Zionists like to present themselves, of course, as the representatives of the Jewish people. They are the real Jewish people, as far as they are concerned. But actually, the truth is entirely the opposite. Not only are they not the real Jewish people, but they've actually turned their back on what it has meant to be Jewish for thousands of years. And if you look at the writings of the Zionists who replanted the ideas which led to the creation of the state, which is now causing so much pain to Palestinians and others in the region, you will see that they didn't very much like Jews. The Zionists really wanted to be white Europeans, and they were worried that the Jews were not like white Europeans. And they thought that if they could build a state on historic Palestine, that would make them white Europeans. And of course, they've succeeded in that, because we see that white Europeans support everything that the Zionists do. They support all the war crimes. They support all the horrors which are visited on the Palestinian people. But what they did not do is keep alive the tradition of Jewish teaching and Jewish living, which they said was a waste of time. They said Jews had spent centuries studying the word of God when they should have been out there with guns and bombs fighting other people. They said that Jews had wasted their time keeping their faith alive when they should have been building a state. And if you look at much of what the Zionist state does, they take the most bloodthirsty bits of interpretations of Jewish tradition in order to justify their deeds, but they do not practice the traditions of Judaism which many of us were brought up in and which have been alive for a long time. So it's, first of all, a mistake to see the Zionists as people who represent the Jewish tradition. Secondly, and following on from that, if you study the Jewish religion, it is possible to interpret that religion, as some of us do, as a religion which denounces Zionism, as a religion which points up to the moral crisis which Zionism has created. I was fortunate some years ago to be invited to a conference in Bethlehem by the Diyar Center. And the Diyar Center is a Palestine Christian liberation theology center, which tries to look at how Palestinian Christians can contribute to the liberation of the Palestinian people. And in that paper, I argued that you could take the Hebrew Bible, and the Hebrew Bible is divided by Jews into 52 portions, each one of which is read on a day of on the Sabbath during the year. You could take every one of those portions of the Jewish scripture, and you could find an anti-Zionist message in them if you looked for it. And my paper was designed to show what those anti-Zionist messages were. So that means potentially that the fact that you are Jewish does not mean that you have to support what the Zionists are doing. Now, this may sound good in theory, but what we've seen over the last year, which I think is potentially a very important development, is that this message that Zionism is not what Jews should be supporting, that is not consistent with our tradition, that is not who we are, that this message is becoming much more popular around the world than it ever was. And we're seeing a very important trend today. We're seeing, up until not that long ago, most Jews who rejected Zionism simply dropped out of being Jewish. They simply didn't want to be identified with being Jewish because they were so horrified with what Zionism was doing. Now we see the opposite trend. We see people saying, I am Jewish, and because I am Jewish, I want nothing to do with what the Zionists are doing. So that if you look at the United States, for example, the protests on the campuses which were angry at what the Zionists were doing and the violence of Zionism, that many of those Jews who participated in that process were people who observed the Jewish religion. So you had this wonderful experience that people talk about, in which Jews and Muslims and Christians were gathered in this protest movement and observed each other's rituals and participated in each other's expressions of their religion in order to make the point that, as some of the speakers have told us already this morning, support for Palestine is a duty of humanity. It's not restricted to one particular group in humanity. And if you go to Britain, for example, you're seeing people hold Jewish religious services which are really anti-Zionist, which are devoted to denouncing Zionism. And this is going to grow because what we're seeing now is that important thinkers who try to think about how the Jewish religion should develop, that these thinkers are beginning to talk about how we need to cleanse Judaism of Zionism. We need a Judaism which has nothing to do with Zionism, which gets rid of all the evil which Zionism has enforced on our tradition and implanted on our tradition, so that we do not have to see the horror of people who are destroying Gaza, who are pretending to be observing Jewish tradition. And we're going to see a lot more of this over the next while or so. We're going to see a lot more of Jews saying, this is not what I am, and this is not what they are. In a wonderful protest in America, which you may have seen, a group of a dozen or more rabbis insisted on committing civil disobedience, on being arrested in protest at the violence which the Americans were doing to the people of Palestine. And we're going to see more of this in the future. Now, if we're looking at strategies to liberate Palestine, I'm not suggesting that what is happening among Jews is the most important issue that we need to consider. But I think that it is an issue which is important to consider. And besides the fact that it is always important to have voices speaking the truth, voices saying this is not being done in the Jewish tradition, that the horror which is being inflicted on Palestine is actually opposed to the Jewish tradition. While it is important in its own right to have that, I think there's a very important strategic issue here for those who are concerned about the future of Palestine. And the issue is this. If we were to suggest that one way to free Palestine was to convince Jewish Israelis that what they are doing is evil, you would be laughed at, and rightly so. Because just as in our South African experience, white South Africans were not interested in changing their ways until they were forced by pressure to change their ways, so Jewish Israelis will not change their ways until there is pressure on them to change their ways. But remember also that there are millions of Jewish people living all around the world who do not have a stake in oppressing the Palestinian people. And the point that I always make is that if you live in Europe or America or other countries we could describe, and you are Jewish, you do not depend on the Israeli state for anything. One of the most laughable claims of the Israeli state is that it makes Jewish people safer. This is ridiculous. The state of Israel is the most dangerous place for Jewish people anywhere in the world. Jewish people are much safer in any other country than they are in the state which is oppressing Palestinian people and provoking the violence of the oppressed people. So the point is that there are many Jews around the world whose support for the Zionist state is greatly exaggerated, and who may well be open to political campaigns explaining to them that being a proud Jewish person does not mean having to be a Zionist. So because my time is up, and I do want to respect the chair's desire to keep time, my parting message is that to stress once again that Jews who are horrified by Zionism, who are disgusted by Zionism, are becoming a much more important trend in Jewish life, that you're going to be hearing those voices more and more, that I would suggest very strongly that those voices can be an important help going forward, not in historic Palestine itself, but in the other countries of the world, in our just attempt not only to free Judaism from the horror of Zionism, but to free the Palestinian people and the people of Levant from what has been imposed upon them. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Professor Stephen Friedman, for those insightful presentations on the importance of interfaith solidarity for justice in Palestine. And of course, speaking particularly from the perspective of the... Without any further ado, we will then move on to our next presenter, who will be Dr. Rashid. Beyond violent extremism and
my assignment. This was not my topic. I'm going to be very straitjacketed and read through my presentation. Important to affirm that Islam, like Christianity, Judaism, intellectual and social vitality is fostered through what I call jihad al-afkar. In light of the above, the view conflict, this lens of settler colonialism is important. In this regard, it is instructive to note that Islam frequently addresses the iniquity and the evil of those who unjustly drive people from their lands. So there is many times in the Quran, يُقَاتِلُكُمْ فِي الدِّينِ وَلَمْ يُخْرِجُوكُمْ مِنْ دِيَارِكُمْ أَنْ تَبَرُّوهُمْ وَتُقْسِطُوا إِلَيْهِمْ إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ الْمُقْسِطِينَ. Neither wish to part of the jihad. These are important part of the strategies. And in the South African struggle, our war was not won on the military battle. Our war was won because of this comprehensive struggle of jihad, and that is very, very, very critical. The current situation in Gaza is a human catastrophe, marked by loss of life on an industrial scale, destruction of infrastructure, and immense human suffering. And the pain and the secondary trauma that we have must not overwhelm us in terms of losing our strategy and tactics in the combat of fighting Zionism. As believers in a compassionate and just God, Ar-Rahman, we cannot remain silent in the face of such horror and immense human suffering. However, as conscientious Muslims, as responsible global citizens, our response must be guided by hikmah, by wisdom, and by an Islamic ethical moral commitment to justice, not only for Muslims, but for each and every citizen of the world. We must therefore reject and hold on to our humanity at this time, narratives that demonize entire peoples or religions, and instead advocate for solutions respecting the rights and dignity of all. And that is why it was so moving to have Professor Steve Friedman witnessing as a practicing Jew that Zionism, in fact, is a distortion of true Judaism. We must not sink into anti-Semitism, although we know that anti-Semitism is being weaponized by the Zionists in order to demonize us. So this includes a ceasefire, calling for a ceasefire, lifting the blockade on Gaza, and demanding accountability for human rights violations. Let me then go to my fifth and last point. This again may be a very contentious point, but this is a conference and we are involved in Jihadul Afkar, so I welcome your critical feedback on this. I would like to share this concept of peace building, Bina'us Salam, a peace building process that I advocate for Palestine is not about establishing a so-called Islamic state, but rather a state grounded in adl, in qist, in justice, karamatul insan, human dignity, and equality for all, especially minority communities. And here I would like to reference the 14th century scholar Ibn Taymiyyah, Taqiyuddin Ibn Taymiyyah, who died in the year 1328 of the Common Era. Interestingly, Ibn Taymiyyah argues that an Islamic state is a just state. He posited that a just Islamic state is one committed especially to economic justice, the eradication of poverty and the huge inequalities in wealth. In our country here in South Africa, we are suffering from this in post-apartheid South Africa and across the world, where workers receive fair wages and economic monopolies are eradicated. That is an Islamic state. Ibn Taymiyyah posited that a state practicing justice, adl and qist, is preferable to a pious tyranny, even if that state is ruled by Muslims. And this is in fact what we are witnessing today, of all the major countries in the world ruled by Muslims, but there's no adl and there is no qist. Additionally, addressing the legacy of settler colonialism and seeking redress for historical injustices must be integral to the peace-building agenda for a future one state, a single state, Islamic state. This peace-building vision resonates with the theological principles outlined, especially in this very important document called Kairos Palestine. Kairos Palestine was formulated by Christian theologians, liberation theologians in Palestine, adopted by them, and advocates for a state based on equality, justice, liberty, and respect for pluralism, rather than being dominated by one particular religion. In conclusion, the struggle for justice and peace building in Palestine is not only a political and a humanitarian issue, but it is a profoundly ethical and spiritual one. In this context, the Islamic tradition offers a rich array of resources on how to confront dhulm, oppression, and build a just society. Spaces such as this conference for dialogue and critical reflection are essential for cultivating a nuanced and a more contextually relevant understanding of Islam in the establishment of justice and peace building. In advocating for justice and peace in Palestine, Muslims are called upon to embody the highest principles of our faith.
لا مشاحة في المصطلحات. We don't have disputes about terminologies. It's about the essence that we have as human beings towards this particular question. We will now hand over and move on to our next Catholicism sermons. Chair, is that Catholicism or
because the sermons can go on forever. So thank you. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you, Sheikh Hishan. I greet you. I said I did my study on Bayers Nodia's Heidelberg Catechism. You know, the Heidelberg Catechism is a Reformation document. So right through history, the church has come to points of struggle. 500 years ago, the Reformation happened where they said back to the Word, because what the church is doing is not according to the Word. And there was a movement, and when a movement like that happens, a document comes to life in which we want to put our faith and express our faith. The same happened here in South Africa when the struggle was at the height of, and it was seen that some members of the church were not opposing it. Some members of the church, like the Dutch Reformed Church, were actually supporting it. A document was born here in 1986 called the Bella Confession, which helps us to again understand who is this God of justice and compassion, because we get distorted living in the systems and the structures. The Apostle Paul, who writes in the New Testament, says that our struggle is not against flesh and blood. We must remember that. Our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but it is against the systems and the structures that are used to, and where people are incorporated in, and which are used to dominate and destroy others. And those are, which people are caught up in, those are the systems that we need to challenge and break down and resist. I am also standing in the tradition of Archbishop Tutu, which also ministered here most of his life, who led the church in the church struggle against apartheid, and who also called for ways of non-violent resistance. When I read the Bible, and the time we are in has become also a time for the church to reflect again on what they believe. There is the Palestinian pastor, Reverend Munter Isaac, who has become also prominent in the past, and even before that, where he also did his study, or his doctoral study on Zionism and the church, and he wrote a book called The Church on the Other Side of the Wall. And that's really an important book to read in the church context, and I believe that Munter is also bringing us to a place in the church's history again, where we need to discern where we are. The Reverend Alan Busak says that it's a time of discernment. We need to discern. He's leading the church in decolonization, because I think the next movement that we are in is the church is being decolonized. And we are reminded that we are part of a community of justice. The Apostle Paul also writes that when one part of the body suffers, the whole body suffers. Therefore, the suffering, the genocide that is happening right in front of our eyes, it is also part of our suffering. These are our brothers and sisters. Therefore, we cannot look away. The gospel is quite clear that there is just no way that any of this can be supported in any way from a biblical basis. There's no way that you can be a Christian and support Zionism. It doesn't exist. There is no thing as a Christian Zionist. It is a made-up term. It doesn't exist because, well, it exists. It's there, but it's not validated by the Bible. You cannot take it from there. I mean, even Jesus himself says that to harm one of these little children, for a person who does that, it is better to put a large stone around his neck and to just sink away in the deepest ocean. So we're looking at the absolute suffering, trauma, murdering of children. There's nothing in the gospel that can support this. We visited Palestine in December. And I just wanted to maybe share some of the testimonies of the people that we experienced there. First of all, I must remind us that my question that I was asked to speak on was religious freedom and sacred spaces in the occupied territories. So I want to take you to an article that was released by the World Council of Churches and speaks about a threat. Let me just get that, sorry. It says in June 2022 already, the World Council of Churches issues a statement. During the past 7 months, the local heads of churches have issued no fewer than 7 statements highlighting the threats posed to the attacks of extremist groups against clergy and church premises, Israeli limitations on freedom of religion and access to holy sites, and other actions that threaten the status quo and the multi-religious and multicultural identity of Jerusalem. And then they go on to list many statements and in ways in which people are prohibited from living out their faith and where freedom of religion is prohibited. So I'm going to try and go through this quickly. We visited Palestine and we met with many people. The first group that we met as we arrived was with the Armenian youth. And we went to the Armenian quarter. And when we got there, we found a group of young people, mostly under 25, who has built structures to trying to protect their property, the Armenian quarter, where more than 500 families are situated, from an Israeli businessman who has come with bulldozers and want to take the place over. There was also a struggle in the church because the church leaders sold out, in a certain sense, to the regime. And the young people stood up and they say, no, we are not going to, our leaders are not leading us, so we need to take the leadership. So that's the first thing that encouraged me on that first day when we got there, is these young people coming together, going out to work, and then coming back in the afternoon to wait at the space and guard it, and other people, and just helping each other in this way. They were also, 2 days after we left, they were attacked as well by Zionists and settlers that came to them. We also met with the Imam from the Al-Aqsa Mosque. We went to his house, Sheikh Ikrima Sabri, and we were so much hospitality received in his with his family and friends, and we spoke there, and he told us about his struggle as well. We wanted to visit the Al-Aqsa Mosque, but it was guarded. We couldn't go in. And he was saying, and we met him 2 days after he was released from being arrested, and because he's occasionally arrested every 6 months or so, and then held without charge. And then he said that they arrested him and said to him that he incites violence against the Israeli state because he incites young people to stand up. And then he said to us, well, I say to them, young people are not allowed to come to the mosque, so how can I incite them if I'm preaching and they're not there? and it is the Israeli state that comes in and makes video recordings of him and then challenges him afterwards and constantly stops him from visiting other places. When we were in Jerusalem, we met with Orthodox Christians, just young people, Christians living everyday lives, saying that they are stopped on the streets. Their phones are being taken from them. If they find anything on there that is in support of family members in Gaza or whoever, then they get arrested and taken in. They were telling us, while we were there, we met Archbishop Petula Hanna, and he was saying us how clergy are being spat on in the streets, how some of these places are being attacked, how specific sacred sites like the upper room for Christians where is seen where Jesus and his disciples met together, closed in a closed room, and that became a very special site for Christians. Also, it has been constantly blocked off and cordoned off, and there's excavations happening, so Christians are not able to go there. When it's festivals in Jerusalem, the people allowed, the Christians allowed to come to Jerusalem are being restricted more and more and more every year. There is certain places where it is said that crosses are not being, cannot be displayed during Easter, for instance in Jerusalem, because it's offensive to Zionists. These are the testimonies that we get. So it is clear, being there, coming from South Africa, also when you live in a situation that has happened like that, you can read the underlying signs of racism and domination and how it works. And it is quite clear to see that the system has been created where you've got people who are seen as humans and the rest is just less humans. We met with Palestinian Christian human rights journalist, and I'm not going to say a name because there was also the fear of being persecuted. And I just want to read maybe something that she said. She says the following, and it's her testimony. It is not like Israel started to detain people on 7 October. Detention is something that has come to shape every single detail of every single Palestinian family for decades. And I ask you to think what that means for Palestinians, that all our human rights work has failed to release one single detainee. Honestly, my only consoling idea is that we need to bear witness. So this is what Scholastic Mukasonga, who writes about genocide in Rwanda, who was in Paris when 37 of her family members were killed in the Rwandan genocide. And she spoke at the time and she says she lives with the struggle of, what do I do? What is my job now? I feel like my notebook is a cemetery for all the people I've lost. And she bears witness, and bearing witness is also bearing a burden. I want to believe that we are creating the testimonies, the stories, the evidence, the documents, the names, the lists, especially challenging Israel's attempt to destroy all, because this is also a war on our memory, individual and collective. When Israel destroys the biggest archive in Gaza, when Israel destroys the biggest community cultural center in Gaza, razes graveyards, and also destroys a complete entire history, one of the oldest mosques in Palestine, and all the archaeological sites, that is also a war on our memory. You can fight this war on memory by unforgetting, by recording and remembering, with the hopes that perhaps these details will one day serve to indict one Israeli war criminal. Perhaps these details will bear witness to what Palestinians went through, and it is probably not now, but maybe along the years, maybe one day, we need to fight towards a future where all war criminals are held accountable, regardless of their identity, and where justice is not just the privilege of a few, but for all. So with that words of our sister in Palestine calling out to us, may we hear that, may we as a church, but also as a broader community of justice, because that is what we are called into. May we continue to raise our voices for freedom, equality, justice, restitution, restoration from the river to the sea. Thank you.
We say thank you to Reverend Rian de Villiers for that impassionate presentation, and we thank him for reminding us about our common humanity despite religion. And when I say religion, I don't mean our adherence to a particular faith, but we talk about power structures, and that of course our struggle is against power systems and power structures, and not against, as you quote from the gospel, the flesh of human beings. And so there's much food for thought in there. Our time is, of course, is of the essence. I'm not going to say is our enemy. And so we are going to haste immediately to our last presenter, Dr. Abu Mahfouz, who has been visiting South Africa over the number of years since the first time I remember with Maulana Ihsan Hendricks, whose memory has also been brought to life again here by our brother Dr. Ayman. And of course that was the first time we met with Dr. Abu Mahfouz. He has since afterwards visited South Africa once or twice again, but he travels the world as an ambassador for peace, for the people of Palestine, as well as a social justice activist. He's a historian, I know, of note, and his research and PhD studies is about the sacred lands as well, and history of the sacred lands. I call upon Dr. Abu Mahfouz to address our gathering.
السلام عليكم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. بصراحة كمسلم أنا أنظر للمسجد الأقصى أو لفلسطين باعتبارها القضية والأولوية والأبجدية والأرشيف والرسالة والأجندة. In brief, المسجد الأقصى is the certificate of Islam in Jerusalem. It has about 33 Islamic priorities. Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, in the holy night of Al-Isra wal-Mi'raj, after returning from the heavens, he prayed on the right side of the holy rock inside Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa as Imam for 25 messengers of Allah, including Isa alayhi salam, Musa, Ibrahim, Nuh, Adam, and the rest, and 1,024 prophets. The Imam was Muhammad, and means it is his property. It is Darul Islam, the land of Islam. Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa means for us, and the night of Al-Isra wal-Mi'raj means that this ummah, the nation of Muhammad, must carry the flag of equality and peace to all humanity. Al-Isra wal-Mi'raj means that this ummah, the ummah of the nation of justice and humanity and peace, should take role and rule over this holy place in order to spread complete equality among all. Now, for all Muslims around the world, Jerusalem is above any differentiations, above any competition. They are all united on this just issue. On the other side, Netanyahu works day and night to build a collective opinion among Zionists, supported by 55 rabbis and mass media and false politicians to embark on a new Middle East regime in which Muslims are slaves, Christians are expelled from the Holy Land, and Zionists work to be the masters of the area. Believe me, in the year 1800, Muslims were only 70 million. And the Jews in general were only 13 million. In the year 1900, Muslims became 270 million people, and the Jews were still about 13 million. In the year 2000 AD, Muslims became 1.5 million Muslims, and the Jews jumps to 14 million. Nowadays, the Jews are about 15 million, but Muslims are 2 milliards and 1/3. 2 milliards and 1/3 of a milliard. And you know that numbers are motivated and يعني Netanyahu can't humiliate such a great ummah, which is about 1/4 of the world. Not all Jews are with Netanyahu. Not all Judaism are with support Netanyahu conspiracies. If they want peace, peace should sprinkle out and spread out and flash out from Jerusalem itself. But Netanyahu and Biden, and you can say Trump, want to drop Orushalayim by parachute on the holy site of Jerusalem. They want to build, Dr. Ayman, they want to build a Jewish state and a Jewish capital, and to get rid of Arabs of all kinds, either Christians or Muslims, together. And this couldn't be. I will tell you, and you all already know, that in the war 1970 and the 1967, Arabs were either Christians or Muslims, were about 70,000. But now they are about 500,000. Instead of the cruel details of Judaizing and Israelizing and changing the status inside Jerusalem. At last, Gaza alone. In Gaza alone in 1948, there were only 150,000. Now in Gaza we have 2.3 million people. And they will never be victims to the weapons of Netanyahu. Netanyahu's cruel plans explode barrels of anger inside Gaza. Gazans, the people of Gaza, waited 75 long years for the Arab solution, for the UN solution, but in vain. And they began working strategically to change their children, to educate their children, to prepare strategically, to recite the Holy Quran. Most of them are engineers inside Gaza, although it is no more than a can of sardines, very small. There are about 62,000 engineers and 42 reciters of the Holy Quran. The strategic thing is the woman. The woman is deeply changed in Gaza. They invest in humans, especially in women. And you know, in Arabia, the woman is the basic of the family. So everything is changed now. The women's, the children suckle patience from the breast of their women. They gave a masterpiece of patience under the bombing of F-35 and F-16 American fighters. The struggle now is between right and false, black and white, between peace and aggression. But I will tell you that this peace in Gaza are the most educated slice in Arabia. They are deeply educated, highly qualified. And you know, the educated is the first one who rebels and the last who surrender. The educated is a different kind of people. In the last year, in this year, they mourn. They suffer. They complain. They are wailing deeply. Without food, without water, without medicine, without clothes, nothing except bombing. But they never surrender. This year, is as long as 1 century. And the struggle in this year is much better than a long century. They are living in their homeland. And these Zionists came from 112 countries just to dominate on Palestine and Jerusalem. We are not against Jews. Jews, Christians, and Muslims. All Jews, Christians, and Muslims are the legal owners of Palestine during centuries. But now, it is Zionism, the leftist extremism in America that rules over the Congress, who want to get rid of peace, of humanity, of equality inside the Holy Land. What is the conclusion? Nowadays, all liberals around the world are united. United in heart, united in slogans, united in demonstrations and activities. For the first time in life, 19,000 demonstrations embarked out in Europe and in America. This is the first time in history. And the Zionism project is shaken strongly at the hands of these refugees inside Gaza. Now Palestine became the address and the iconic address for all seekers for peace around the world. It is the essence of a beauty, and it is the center of the world. Madinatul Jalali wal Jamal. The city, Jerusalem, is the city of nobleness and beauty. And it talents all liberals around the world. Frankly, future is smiling for the people of Jerusalem and Palestine. Future will be for us. We are seekers of freedom, of liberty, of equality, of dignity, of life. But the people of Gaza are seeking for medicine, for air to smell, for genocide to stop, seeking to get rid of killing day and night, of massacres. People of South Africa. I am very happy to visit you and to stay this hour with you. No East, no West. South Africa is the best. South Africa is the enemy of aggression, of discrimination, of oppression, of tyranny. South Africa, to us in Arabia, in Palestine, in Gaza, is the symbol of a freedom. Your cheerings here, either Jews, Christians, or Muslim in Cape Town, is deeply heard in Amman, in Jordan, in Jerusalem, in Arab area. We see your activities. We are proud of you, your government, your role in Hollanda, in the international laws, your lawyers, your enthusiasm, your jealous. Only South Africa support Gaza faithfully. You are samples, good samples of humanity. We'll never forget your role. We'll never forget your support. Please keep on supporting these targeted refugees and victims of Netanyahu. Long live South Africa. Long live its people. Long live. Thank you.
We say thank you very much to Dr. Saoud Abu Mahfouz. I don't think we could have a more fitting end to the first sector of the religious panel of the Freedom for Palestine Mahrajan here this morning. I have to apologize to everybody else here, though. Our time is completely up. I am not going to allow the opportunity for questions or comments to be made. There is the Friday prayers, of course, in front of us, but an entire panel must first still also be presented and deliberate before the Friday prayers. I wish to thank each and every one of our four panelists. First and foremost, Professor Stephen Friedman, Dr. Professor Rashid Omar, our beloved friend, Dr. Dominique Reverend Rian de Villiers, and of course our Ustad, Dr. Saoud Abu Mahfouz. Allah bless you all abundantly, and thank you very much for your contribution here. And everybody else, let's thank them appropriately.
Our time is slightly delayed at the moment because of a late start. I would like to ask the participants that we have a short break. There will be a tea coffee break at the back, but please make it only for 10 minutes. By 1:15, we'd like to start the second sector, which is the diplomatic and government sector response to the genocide in Palestine. The beverages and the snacks are at the back of the hall. Please proceed immediately. Those members that are participating that needs to register, can you kindly come on this side of the screen? Then we can register those members and you can have your name tag, please. All the other members, please proceed back and you can enjoy some snacks and some beverages. Thank you very much.
I'm going to connect his laptop so long.
Okay,
He's third up.
Marco. I'm
Marco.
Fazlin. I'm the moderator of the panel.
Oh, nice.
Okay. So you have a presentation?
Yes.
Okay.
But I'm the third anyway, so.
Yeah, okay.
Is here actually also shown the time, how much time we have?
Yes.
Is it on the screen?
No, it's not, but I'll manage it.
Okay.
So
So
don't
I think
worry.
it's a good idea.
Yes, it would have been a good idea actually, yeah. So that you could see
I don't know
it.
what's shown here actually then.
I think you see
Camera,
yourself.
Okay.
Or you might see you. I'm not sure.
Yeah, okay. Picking up now. Go extended screen.
I'm just gonna leave my thingy.
Yeah. And
Present mode.
yeah. Okay, I'm just gonna check now. Sorted out now, no?
Okay.
Can we copy
Yeah,
everything of yours?
I have already copied everything here. And how I can continue the next slides is there, we have a...
No, the laptop will be...
Ah, okay, fine. Even better. Yeah, sure.
Our laptop presentation is loaded on here.
After him, this laptop must come to the back now. There's a lady that wants to play full video.
Okay. So when you are done, entity was one favor, just bring this laptop to unplug it. So is this view fine for you? Yeah? Look. Yeah? Yes, that's great. Yeah. That's good. Okay, that's perfect. Okay, perfect.
going to stay with us? You're going to stay? Okay, go ahead. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, can everybody please kindly be seated? We will start with the second sector, which is the diplomatic and government sector. You can bring your coffee and tea along and have your sandwich at the table, and we can then start with the proceedings. I now call upon the moderator for this session. That will be Ms. Fadlan Fransman, who will take responsibility, and of course, our special speakers that are here will join us in front. So I'm handing it over to our moderator to call upon our speakers for this particular sector. Thank you very much. You got the shade of the... Okay. Just call the 5 people up. Is it 4 of them that can come sit?
Yeah. Can we have the speakers on the diplomatic and government panel come to the front, please? It's that lady over there. Yeah. We ask our honored guests to please take a seat. I'll call you. Maybe you can, yeah. Can our honored guests please take a seat? We're about to start and quiet down.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. We need to start now, inshallah. Can everybody just be silent? Shh. Shaykh Abdullah, Faisal. Shukran, Fazlan.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to everybody. This is the second panel on the Freedom for Palestine conference. This panel is specifically dedicated to the political and diplomatic sector. We have an array of esteemed guests, all international guests. And when we think about politics within the context of the Palestinian question, there are various facets that we speak about. There is the multilateral facet, where we're looking at institutions like the UN. There is intergovernmental and government-to-government relations. And then there's also lobby groups and the role of people in terms of their lobbying towards government. So within that context, our esteemed panel of guests will speak to those array of issues, going from the role of Western powers to the role of multilateral institutions, and even possibly answer the question around the normalization of a two-state solution. Is that the political solution? Should there be something else on the table? And this is the engagement that we want to encourage with this panel. So I encourage my esteemed panel, as our moderator before said, to try and stick to 10 minutes, if possible, so that we can have engagement from the audience as well. So I'm going to call on our brother Nabil, who is going to introduce our first guest.
Assalamu alaikum jami'an. Good afternoon to everybody. So first of all, I will of course introduce our great comrade and not only friend and brother, he's a real supporter of Palestine. Mr. Kostas Assichos, he's a former defense minister in Greece, but he's a great defender for Palestine and Jerusalem. But before that, Mr. Kostas, he carried with him a little message from our great supporter, Professor Passias Vangelis. Professor Passias Vangelis himself, he was the founder of the Free Gaza movement, or they were the pioneer of breaking the siege in Gaza. And he was the architecture of most of missions to break the siege of our people in Gaza and to support our cause to the last second, as he now in a hospital just counting the days before he leave. But he insisted before he leave to send you the message of support to the last breath that he's with you and with the resistance fighter in Palestine and in Lebanon as well. Please, Mr. Kostas. All right.
Salam alaikum. Thank you for hosting this very important international conference. First of all, I want to thank South Africa, because South Africa is the historical and the moral leader and protagonist for Palestine, for a free Palestine today. And of course, the organizations responsible for organizing this conference. I start, as Nabil said, with a few words from our comrade and longtime friend and brother, Vangelis Passias, who is living his last days on this earth. He was a pioneer of struggle for Palestine, an international struggle that he led, as Nabil said, an architect of a free Gaza, of an unoccupied Gaza, and he was the leader of the peace flotilla in 2010, which carried on after breaking the naval encirclement of the Israelis and the Zionists around Gaza. My friends, my only regret is that I gave not enough for Palestine. I have not done enough, as much as I would have to, for our common cause. I want to thank my long-time brothers, Dr. Maan Bashur in Beirut, Nabil Halak, and Ali Fayed. I want to thank all the people from Palestine and the Arab nation and peoples I met through my life. No goodbyes, no tears, no regrets, only a smile for the victory that is coming and the beginning of a free state of Palestine. I will try to be disciplined in the 10 minutes, and I will wait for you to wave me to finish, because this title and the thematic, as I was telling Gabriel, is very difficult. It's very complex, and it has to be articulated, but we can put some general ideas forward in order to do our best. My weakness and my liability is that I was born in Latin America, raised in Argentina, studied in Cuba, lived in Canada, in Cuba, and then I went to Greece. So I think in Spanish, I write in Greek, but my heart is Palestinian. I say this because the diversity we have here from the international group, which many are good friends and comrades from all days, from Ireland, from Austria, from China, Lee, and other places, and our Greek group here with Nadia Valavani, also a former minister, Yanis Rachiotis, a very well-known civil lawyer in the international and the Greek field, and Evgenia and Nikos and Evgenia, who are documentarists who were in occupied West Bank and Jenin and other villages a few weeks ago, and they're going to show us some of the videos they took, because they are also the people of Greece. We do not represent the government of Greece, which we are very ashamed of, and the political systemic opposition. We represent the conscience and the hearts of the Greek people here. The laboratory of neoconservatism, the most advanced social and political laboratory today, is the European Union. The new forms of neo-fascism, neo-Nazism, and extreme right wings in Europe is taking flesh and bone. And we're living this because this is a transition for humanity with contradictions. We've had humanity which is trying to liberate itself from North American imperialism and hegemony, Euro-Atlanticism, and on the other side we have a construction of multipolarity against hegemonism, with many contradictions, but it is a new road to build, and we have to all try to see how this road is going to develop. And of course, South Africa, as I said in the beginning, is playing a protagonist role for one reason only. South Africa is not interested in putting out the Palestinian issue in the top of its international agenda, because it has oil companies that want to invest in the Middle East outside of Gaza. It is not doing it because it has geopolitical interests, but because it suffered apartheid, colonialism, imperialism, and genocide here in South Africa, and they have a moral obligation to do that for their brothers and sisters in Palestine. That is why they're doing it, and we admire them from that, and we thank them. Let's make a hypothetical analysis. 50 years ago, we have an academic in a conference on science and space, and he says that the Earth is flat. 50 years ago. He will probably be given strong psychological and psychiatric help. Today, 50 people around the world believe that the Earth is flat. This is the transition of the new crusaders who want to take us from the 21st century to the Middle Ages back again. And it's a conservatism against science, against philosophy, against the liberation of religions, which have a common denominator, which we had in the previous session. A common denominator, just peace and love for humanity as a whole. Meaning that diplomacy today is crumbling, official diplomacy. Look at the United Nations. A few days ago, Israel indicted, or prohibited, to better say, the General Secretary Guterres as a persona non grata in Israel. Why Israel is doing that today? The political and the military leaders have taken this decision because they know very soon in the General Assembly of the United Nations there will be an adoption of the majority of nations and peoples in the world for a general boycott against the Zionist regime. This is what they're doing it. They want to prevent such a decision. So Netanyahu, when he says, and we thank him for being honest and truthful, when he says that Israel today is defending the Western way of life and democracy, he is true about this content of this position. Why? Because Western civilization in the last 500-600 years has been based on colonialism and genocide. In North America, 35 million natives. Central America, Latin America, 28 million natives. Africa, Belgian Congo, South Africa, endless numbers of nations and peoples. Millions and millions of genocide. So they did have good teachers. And he says, thank you for being our teachers. This is what his truth is about. And this is the diplomacy we have to fight. The diplomacy of double standards. When Antony Blinken in the morning, he says to the American public, in order to intervene in the American elections, he says to the American public, yes, we do want a truce. The truce is necessary today. And the next day, he congratulates Israel for assassinating political opponents. In the morning, he says, you have to have a truce. And in the evening, he says, thank you for killing. This is not just double standards. This is an ancient Greek word which you also have in your language. This is total hypocrisy, total lie, more than double standards. And this diplomacy that we have to fight, this official diplomacy, it was very well articulated by my brother from the Al-Quds Foundation in Turkey. He said that we have to find practical ways to carry on these conferences, which we had in Johannesburg a few months ago, and now here in Cape Town, and they will continue around the world. But we have to find practical ways, practical steps to see how we are active in our societies today, in our countries. I will give you a short example. In Greece, Greece has a very deep relationship with Israel and the United States today, especially militarily. The Israelis have a military base in southern Greece, an Air Force educational base, which of course they can use in other ways. Recently, about 10 days ago, 2 naval ships from the Israeli Navy were in a naval exercise in a Greek island trying to see if they would invade northern Lebanon, close to Beirut, to see how they would succeed in an invasion, a short invasion with their elite commandos and troops in a later phase of their genocidal war against Lebanon. We came out, we had many marches around Greece, in universities especially, the young people, as it was mentioned, in every campus, in every university in the Western world is up in arms with their hearts and souls and lifting their fists for a free Palestine. This is a great victory and a great loss for Israel, because Israel believes it's having tactical military victories. But how can you learn from history when you have a military so-called victory and the whole world is against you? What kind of a victory is that? Does Vietnam teaches us any historical and political experience? Does Cuba? On the 7th and 8th of October, Che Guevara was assassinated in Bolivia by the American CIA agents. How many Che Guevaras were born after that? And how many Nasrallahs and Haniyas will be born after that? So this is the truth. They do not learn from history because the revolutionary martyrs for social justice, for freedom around the world, live on in the memories of the people. That is why one of the most important tools of North American oligarchs in the media is trying to distort history. In the history books in my country, we are taught that Greece has gone through a long period of 2,000 years of many invasions and occupiers. But you know what our grandmothers used to tell us before we went to bed? You better go to sleep because the crusader is going to come. The crusaders stayed in the mind of the people as the worst invaders who stole treasures, ancient treasures, decorating today the cities of northern Italy or central Germany or France or so on. So we have to work with our Irish comrades and our Greek lawyers and Irish lawyers for one reason, because they will be the legal arm on how to make the people understand and the movements around the world understand what genocide, what population displacement, what the current crimes, which are not only against the Geneva Conventions or the United Nations General Assembly resolutions, are taking place. Israel has broken almost every word and every content of international law today. And this is being hidden by the media in the West. This is being erased from the books of history tomorrow and today and the articles that are being written by so-called Western analysts. So Israelis' doctrine of assassination is today perhaps a science that surpasses even the mafia killings in the 20s in the United States, in the 1920s. Because the mafia assassination code was the following: kill your opponent, but don't touch his family. This was a mafia code. In the military schools, I know this from what I had to take care of when, for a few months, I was in the ministry. In every military school, every military cadet in the West, in the South, in the East, and the West says, in a war we have codes. You have to protect the civil population. What is military and political leaders doing in Israel today? First, they displace and they assassinate and they create genocide on the massive population, civil populations of Palestine, occupied Palestine, and Lebanon today, and of course Syria in the last years. So I have a couple of minutes. I will just finish up by saying a few thoughts on what we might do from now on. People's diplomacy against formal Western diplomacy. What we're doing today is people's diplomacy. Social organizations, political organizations, religious organizations, academics, universities, alternative media, like what we're going to see from our documentary from Nikos later on, trade unions, lawyers in international law specialized, arts and culture, social and political organizations all over the planet must abide in an international wave of humanity against this genocide, because this will completely seal out the strategy of Israel, which is a closed door. It's going into a small corridor with no light at the end. And they know this, but they're fanatical and they're protecting their own political survival. This is what Netanyahu and his group of assassins is doing today. They're protecting their political present, but not their future, because they will be sacrificed by imperialism as the perpetrators of a small mistake in the future. But they will continue on that road, taking care of what is unnecessary today. So proposals for people's diplomacy, following up in movements which are connected into a web, an international web of close cooperation in the fields that we mentioned. And the cooperations of peoples and nations which are building also a multipolar world. In a couple of days in Central Asia, in Kazan, we will have the BRICS summit. They're going to adopt a few questions trying to arrange how they're going to trade among themselves away from the dollar. Because the dollar is not just a green bill which says, in God we trust. Of course, they trust in one God, which is money and imperialism. This is their God. They're truthful about that too. They're always truthful. There always is a truth about the genociders and the assassins and the criminals and the people who are in power. They're very truthful, but we have to discover the words and the meaning and try to put our content in the reality which is taking place today. So, my friends, dear brothers and sisters, dear comrades, I will just finish by saying that this conference is a step forward for humanity. And one of the most incredible strengths we have is the diversity between us. Not just the different colors of our skin, not just our different religions, not just our beliefs, because we have a common denominator in our struggle, which is the best way to beat our enemy. It's called Palestine.
Some dynamic insights that were shared, and as we pivot to our next speaker, I want to just highlight one nugget that I think ties into our next speaker. And it's this notion of multilateral organizations. So we saw that South Africa took Israel to the ICJ. And obviously that is an institution that is part of the United Nations. And there's a big question about the relevance of an organization like the United Nations within the context of the fact that it is still controlled by the global north, very much Western powers. So within that context, and looking at the legal aspects of the Palestinian case, I'm going to invite our comrade from the Republic of Ireland, Mr. Gary Daly. Gary is a solicitor. He is he's a committee member of the Ireland-Palestine Solidarity Campaign, and he's had years as in extensive political lobbying and pressure groups. Gary?
Thank you very much. I'm just going to try and set this up here. So I had a much longer speech written, and trying to tell a lawyer to keep it short is not always the idea, but I'll do my best anyway. Now, starting my stopwatch. So thank you very much to you, the chair, to my fellow speakers and the organisers, and to you all for attending, comrades, brothers and sisters. Very honoured to be here today, having travelled from Ireland. As the introduction says, I'm a lawyer in Ireland. I'm also founder of Irish Lawyers for Palestine. I'm also involved, from my previous career as a boxer, with Irish Sport for Palestine. And we're very proud to stand in solidarity with Palestine, with the people of the oppressed and occupied people of Palestine. My wonderful comrade and brother, and the man, the reason I'm here today, Nabil Halak, has asked me to speak for a moment on Palestinian refugees. We're all aware that UNRWA, the United Nations Refugee Works Agency, has been under threat from Israel, astoundingly. We are also aware that Palestinian refugees in Lebanon have been under bombardment, and we are hoping to organise some international solidarity with the Palestinian diaspora and with Palestinian refugees, particularly in Lebanon and obviously in the occupied Palestinian territories. So my topic today, what I was asked to speak on, was Palestinians and the International Criminal Court. So I'm just going to give you a short history of the ICC, the International Criminal Court. It's the first and only permanent international criminal court. It's a court of last resort aimed at deterring and ensuring accountability for the most serious crimes. That's genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, and since 2018, the crime of aggression, which is very relevant today. The court was set up in 1998 by the Rome Statute, and the court came into operation in 2002. The Rome Statute now has 124 state parties. Of the 7 countries that voted against the establishment of the International Criminal Court, the Rome Statute, it will surprise nobody here today, I'm sure, to know that 2 of those 7 countries is America and Israel. It should also be noted, and South Africa is going to get lots of positive mentions today, it should also be noted that during the negotiations on the Rome Statute, the South African development community, which was led by the post-apartheid South Africa, took very strong positions, negotiating positions, in the development of the Rome Statute and the creation of the International Criminal Court. The ICC considers cases against individuals and must be distinguished from the International Court of Justice. The International Court of Justice rules on interstates. The most famous one, and again, we're extremely proud of the role that South Africa have played in this, the case taken against Israel in January of this year under the Genocide Convention. And I should note that one of the lawyers representing South Africa is an Irish woman, Blina Nigralig, a wonderful lawyer. We should also note the role that the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, has played in issuing advisory opinions. An extremely powerful and helpful advisory opinion was issued in July of this year. And quoting from that, it says that Israel's prolonged occupation over Palestinians living in Gaza and the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, and its settlement enterprise are illegal under international law and constitute apartheid. Israel must immediately withdraw its troops, evacuate all 750,000 Israeli settlers from the West Bank, and pay Palestinians reparations. It was an extremely powerful advisory opinion. In 2004, the ICJ also issued an advisory opinion in relation to the construction of the wall that they're building around the West Bank, and the court found that the Israeli state must immediately tear down that wall, to use Trump's a counter to Trump's favouring of walls. However, as we all know, that wall continues to be constructed. The ICJ also found, by the way, and again a very important finding, that Israel cannot rely on a claim of self-defense under the UN Charter because it is the occupying power, so therefore it cannot be self-defense. In terms of the ICC's engagement with Palestinians, in 2009, after Operation Cast Lead, which we all remember was the terrible onslaught on Gaza, Palestine lodged a declaration with the Registrar of the International Criminal Court to accept the court's jurisdiction. After 3 years of deliberation, the ICC prosecutor, and he was hugely criticised for doing so, refused to accept jurisdiction over Palestine. Many years campaigning went on then, and after 12 long years, eventually in 2021, the ICC's pre-trial chamber ruled that the court does indeed have jurisdiction, and the prosecutor confirmed that an investigation in relation to the occupation of Palestine and the crimes that are being committed will now proceed. Following receipt of a referral, again from South Africa, Bangladesh and other countries, on the 17th of November 2023, the prosecutor confirmed that its earlier investigation was ongoing and extends to the events of 7th of October 2023. On the 20th of May 2024, the ICC prosecutor Karim Khan, who is a King's Counsel from Britain, applied to the court for arrest warrants to be issued against Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his Defence Minister Yoav Gallant in respect of war crimes and crimes against humanity in relation to the events since October 7th. Arrest warrants were also sought against 3 leaders of the Palestinian resistance, 2 of whom have been murdered since, as have been described this morning by Dr. Nawal and by my friend Dr. Ayman Zaidan. The charges that the application covers include the war crime of intentionally using starvation of civilians as a method of warfare, as well as various other war crimes and crimes against humanity associated with starvation and other acts of violence against the civilian population. So the next steps in terms of the arrest warrants, the ICC chamber must issue a warrant if it believes there are reasonable grounds to believe that a person has committed a crime within the jurisdiction of the court, and the arrest of that person is necessary. There are no time limits for this. Will the case ever come to trial? So the ICC cannot try individuals in absentia. So custody of the accused is key for any prosecution to proceed to trial. So the arrest of Netanyahu and Gallant is necessary. If arrest warrants are issued, there will be consequences for the persons to whom the warrants apply. The 124 states that have signed up to the Rome Statute will be obliged to arrest the suspects and transfer them to the court. So if the arrest warrants issue, if Netanyahu and Gallant go to any of the 124 states that have signed up to the Rome Statute, they will be obliged to arrest them and transfer them to the court for prosecution. There have been many delays in the issuing of since the referrals in the issuing of the arrest warrants. The British Tory government lodged a request to submit a written amicus curiae observation. Of course, the British Tories have always been fulsome in their support of the Israeli regime. This has been withdrawn by the Labour government, but the current Labour government, but it has still caused huge delays. Of course, the Israeli government itself lodged its own challenge to the International Criminal Court's jurisdiction. The ICC is operating in a climate of unprecedented external pressure and direct threats. Revelations in the media have exposed a 9-year-long campaign of espionage and surveillance conducted by Israeli intelligence agencies targeting the ICC and its officials. This includes reports that former ICC prosecutor Fatou Bensouda was personally threatened by the former head of Mossad, who warned him, and I quote, "You don't want to be getting into things that could compromise your security or that of your family." Extraordinary. The obstruction of the ICC has been marked not only by covert espionage, but by overt political threats. On the 24th of April 2024, 12 US Republican senators issued a letter to the ICC prosecutor Karim Khan threatening sanctions against him and his family. Benjamin Netanyahu, of course, has released many statements threatening the ICC and has described the court's actions as pure anti-Semitism. Now, the International Criminal Court itself is not without criticism. It is a political institution which operates ideologically as part of our contemporary global order to sustain prevailing constellations of power. The court reifies white supremacy and helps mask and perpetuates exploitation and inequality. If the institutional dynamics at the UN were different, we would certainly be directing all arguments and energies towards the necessity of political and economic sanctions against Israel, but instead arrest warrants are sought against individuals. Meanwhile, as we wait for the ICC to decide on the arrest warrants, women and children are being slaughtered in Gaza in ways that we never thought imaginable. And this is all supported by the American regime. In conclusion, I am reminded by the infamous interview with Madeleine Albright, the former US Secretary of State. The interviewer asked her, "We have heard that 500,000 Iraqi children have died. I mean, that is more children than died in Hiroshima. And you know, is the price worth it?" Albright answered, "I think that is a very hard choice, but the price is worth it." This has always been the way for the Americans and their colonial friends. Brown lives do not matter, and we fight against this every day. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. I think this notion of the Global South and the oppressed people is something that so many people can resonate with, because Gary is from Ireland, and very often people ask, why are the Irish in such fervent support of Palestinians? And one of the key things to remember is that if you've suffered oppression, you know that you cannot stand for it anywhere. And I think that is why South Africa has that same sentiment. So moving from the legal to the not legal, we are in an era where public sentiment around the Palestinian issue has changed. We've seen the use of social media and how it's shifted narratives in the global north, in Western countries. We've seen how political candidates are being challenged. And so to unpack that, we have Mr. Marco Wanjura, who's from Austria. Marco was a parliamentary candidate. He is a human rights and political activist. Marco?
Friends, comrades, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Marco Wanjura. I am a co-founder of the newly founded party in Austria, which was running for the general election in Austria, List Gaza, which my comrade will elaborate a bit further later, with a big success in a short time. And I'm also a founder of the Palestine Solidarity Movement in Austria, which is an umbrella organization for all pro-Palestine movements in Austria. Seven years ago, I had the privilege to be here in South Africa, to be part of the critical Muslim studies and liberation theologies, the decolonial studies. I've met great scholars like Farid Essaq, Salman Said, Ramon Grasvogel, and many more, which was also an important step to invite them later on in Austria to speak in Austria, like Farid Essaq or Roshan Dadoo, and many more to come, which I'll show you a bit later. Yes, we are here. First of all, I want to thank the Al-Quds Foundation and Maharajan to organize, and for the invitation, Sheikh Ibrahim and Nabil for organizing all this enormous important event, Palestine for Freedom Conference. I was told that people in South Africa would also like to hear about a bit on Austria and how the situation is there, and yeah, what Austria looks like, and a short introduction for that. So this is the page what we had founded, Gaza, like it's the first, I think, first party in the world which is called Gaza itself, and was on 85% on the ballot papers in Austria in the general election this September. And this was our goal, and we achieved that. And the subtitle of our party is called Voices Against Genocide. So this is the Palestine Solidarity logo. Yeah, so Austria is in the middle of Austria, was always a center of imperial powers and imperial thinkers. You might know Austria, for example, with Mozart, for example. You might know Arnold Schwarzenegger. Maybe you know him more in the movies, Terminator. And last not but least, also what Austria is unfortunately known of is for this guy also, which we don't like to commit that he is from Austria. Vienna, as mentioned, maybe you didn't know, but in 1914, there were many big historic figures which lived almost next door each other. Sigmund Freud, Joseph Tito, Hitler, as mentioned, Joseph Stalin, Leon Trotsky, and also Theodor Herzl, who was studying at my university also back then. During my studies at the Faculty of Law and Oriental Studies at the University of Vienna, I also had the opportunity to meet and listen to Miko Pellet, one of the biggest and most popular BDS supporters on universities in the United States. And after this meeting, me and other like 4 or 5 members started to organize BDS branch in Austria. And this has been 10 years ago now. 2014 we founded this movement. And I just want to encourage everyone. It doesn't matter how Zionist poisoned your society or your government is. Like even with 4 or 5 people, you can change so much you can't imagine. So we have been doing info tables at universities. Yeah, this was Roshan Dadu, which we invited for the Israeli Apartheid Week. Farid Isaac, Ronnie Casrills was the last South African. Film screenings, I think it's a very, very effective tool to show films. Like the last one we showed was Israelism. It's very effective to show a new audience to what's going on in Palestine and to unpack this Zionist ideology. Protests, of course, in Austria. We have, I think there was one page showed that we had 1,000 protests in this tiny, they said 1,000, but I think it's a bit less, but we had really in all Austria, in almost all cities, many, many big cities. We have, over the last 1 year, we had every Saturday in Vienna, we had a rally for Palestine, and which is unprecedented in Austrian history. Vienna was named as the most livable city in the world many times. But can you imagine? Austria and Vienna turned into a NATO and Israel haven over the last 30 years since the fall of the Soviet Union. In Austria, you can get persecuted by stating the sentence, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free." We had hundreds of charges with over 500 euros each individual for calling this sentence. And when you go to Germany, you will even see worse things like house raidings for this slogan, arrests at streets and restaurants. You can be arrested if they find out you said this sentence in social media or anywhere. In schools, young students were prohibited to wear kufias in German schools. But in Austria, we have had over 13 protests banned since October, and many things to come, and also legal criminalization, especially also very anti-Muslim policies in Austria. And that's why actually we also founded this party to, first of all, step up against genocide, to call for an end of every cooperation with the State of Israel, and to end these anti-Muslim policies in Austria. This was our game. In Austria voted, can you imagine, Austria as a neutral country voted 3 times in a row in the United Nations against the ceasefire, also in the European Parliament. That's why also are obliged to step up, because we said no. Germany and the United Kingdom abstained, and Austria as a neutral country said no to the ceasefire, can you imagine? And hoisted the Israel flag on the presidential house and the chancellor house, streamed the Israel flag on the parliament. hoisted the Israeli flag and the Ukrainian flag on the city hall of Vienna and Graz, which were all social democrats or liberal minds who are all combined in the Western world. Yeah. Vienna City Council also banned BDS, so this is what I wanted to tell you before. 6 people worked 2 years hard to promote BDS in Austria. After 2 years, we had an own resolution banning us from all public rooms in Vienna. And 1 year after, we had an anti-BDS resolution at the University of Vienna. The importance of social media, I think you will all know. So where I'm here this time. It's the most documented genocide in the world in human history. And yeah, this is one figure. The social media usage worldwide compared to the population. Here's just, I have to fasten up. Yes, I'll have a bit of time. So over 5 billion people on this earth are using social media. And it's a major player in today's politics, which means 62% of the population in the world is using social media. 93% of people who have access to internet are using social media. And you won't believe, but 2 hours, 20 minutes is the average use per day of social media nowadays. The impact of all these pages is enormous. I had to highlight also Wikipedia, of course, which the Zionist regime very, very early was very important for them to manipulate that, because every student, every teacher, every professor was thinking, what is Palestine, what is BDS, whatever, we'll go on Wikipedia and we'll learn there. And then we'll be brainwashed totally. And so it's a very important step also to help out, to cleanse these narratives on social media, especially in Wikipedia. Of course, there's many technical questions. There is no time to talk about this now. For every platform, you have different setups and timings of engagements when you post things, and this has to be manipulated accordingly. A bit last minute, okay. So I have some suggestions which I will go through fast now. There is a transparency law in Europe which is not yet passed in Austria, but I wish deeply it was. And I can also suggest for you to have such a law that you can pressure governments to make public, for example, email traffic between, for example, your university when they, for example, raid an anti-protest camp for Palestine, and to demand, for example, or for example, they cancel an BDS event at the university, and to demand all the email traffic of the head of your university and, for example, the Israeli embassy, what is coming in there. And so the public has a right to know who is really in charge of all that. So this is one suggestion. So publicity. I think everything to make public is a weapon for justice. Also want to suggest, we had a congress, a Palestine Congress in Vienna now, and we had one idea that to make a database for genocide apologists, deniers, or enforcers. Because the day will come, like in 10 years, when people will be taught at law schools about the genocide. Then we will need a database who apologized all this, denied it, or even enforced this genocide. So we will have a database. For example, you have a journalist denying there is a genocide happening. Okay, your name, your sentence, everything. We make a database for all these people who were complicit in this genocide, and we will need this database in the future to hold them accountable. So next one is, we had me and a comrade in Austria. He is very involved in the Turkish society in Austria. We had this idea of a boycott foundation, and we are already starting to build that, which means we want to support local businesses and make it possible, like for example in kebab stores, restaurants, and so etc., to get rid of all companies and brands which are complicit in genocide, or other exploitations like Nestle, which is buying all the water springs in Southern America or in Africa and stealing all the water resources in Africa. So there's a deep need for such a foundation to make business for justice. And so we had this idea that we, like for example, in restaurants, for example, that there's a brand, Tiroler Cola in Austria, it's a local cola, to make a package, like replace the fridge with all Coca-Cola and all other brands which fund not not just the Israeli genocide, but also other injustice. And yeah, last, the culture of debates, I think is very important, but I really admire, and I have experienced, like also my first Friday prayer in the Claremont Main Road Mosque here in South Africa 7 years ago, and I really admire South Africa for their freedom of speech and political freedom. I think it's unprecedented that you can speak in mosques on Palestine, but also about all injustice in the world. I think there's no other place like in South Africa where you can do that. And I really admire you and applaud you for that. Last point, I want to make clear that we in Palestine are there, but also in the party Gaza, that we always declared and recognized the Palestinians' right to defend themselves, including their armed resistance against 76 years of ongoing ethnic cleansing, occupation, and colonization, like stipulated in all. International law. Yeah. How I can go down. Yeah. Okay, it's gone. So the mouse pad is gone. Yeah. So the laptop is not working anymore, but I just will end with this. If the happenings in Gaza don't touch you, move you, you need to see a doctor. It is a catastrophe of humanity, as the Imam said before. And I just want to remind you on the words from Dr. Tariq Sawedan, who said, of course, we are touched and moved by the atrocities being committed in Gaza, but immediately we should think of what can I contribute to stop this genocide in Gaza right now? And to end with this sentence, like a German woman I was meeting recently, we were asking her about what she thinks about Gaza and so on. She was saying, oh, I'm a German, I can't speak on this issue, you know, we can't speak on that. And I always said the opposite. I said, as we as Austrians, with our history, with our responsibility, we should be the first ones in the world actually to stand up for justice, freedom, and liberation. Thank you very much. Freedom for Palestine.
Thank you. Thank you, Marco. I think just one point before we introduce our final speaker is that very often, especially in a society like South Africa, where it's easy to be pro-Palestinian because most people are pro-Palestinian. I think the presentation by Marco and probably all the speakers speaks to the fact of how difficult it is in a country to be pro-Palestinian when you are in a minority. So on that note, I want to invite our final speaker to the podium, Dr. Olga Nantia Valvani. She is from Greece. She is a Greek politician and economist, and she was an alternate minister of finance in Greece in 2015. Dr. Nantia? Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's all right. And I must also say that I never considered myself a politician. Since 18 years old, I'm a member of the movement. I got into prison when I was 19 and got out with the general amnesty when the junta in Greece fell. But I was unhappy. I had the chance, along with Kostas and a few other comrades that resigned within 6 months, to become ministers at the first Alexis Tsipras Syriza, the first Syriza government in Greece. Lots of hopes and a very big refutation of all these hopes at the end of the 6 months. And after then, I have stopped fighting against being named a politician, because everybody says he was a minister, he's a politician. So I do not say anything anymore. But in such meetings, within dear comrades and friends and brothers and sisters, where, you know, Nabil knows me, and he said it. Dear sisters and brothers, thank you very much heartily for your very honorable invitation. It's, as Costa says at the beginning, because we have got an almost similar theme, subject, which will proceed towards it from different directions. It's a little bit complicated, so I would beg a little bit more time. It's a well-versed fact that the source of the Palestinian question lies with the British colonial policies for the area, producing the Balfour Mandate for Palestine. Over 1 century later, the primary focus of the terrible days we are living again in East Mediterranean remains fixed on no other than the Palestinian people, and since October 1st, on the people of Lebanon too. The Lebanese found themselves once again to have to pay in blood and loss and destruction of their way of life, their solidarity to the Palestinian cause and of their determination to live in a free Lebanon instead of a partitioned, partly Israeli-occupied country. What's been happening for a year now in Gaza has attained the status of a paradigm for the Israeli government, planning and executing it. Netanyahu, who prefers his dirty work being done by others, said about it through a video message to the people of Lebanon a few days after the assassinations of Sayed Nasrallah and his immediate possible successors, and the start of the Israeli ground invasion in southern Lebanon. Save your country before it plunges into an abyss of destruction and suffering like Gaza. Free yourselves from Hezbollah to bring an end to the war. Netanyahu is in the best position of knowing what exactly this Gaza paradigm is referring to. According to an EU observer, Andrew Redman, published in EU Observer 7th July this year, as well as to a study of Brown University, in Gaza, IDF managed to kill in just 1 year about 120,000 people, identified people, not numbers as the little pamphlet says, but real people with flesh and blood and dreams and all the things that define a human being. In their majority, children and women. Among them, a little bit less than half, that is about 52,000, are violent deaths of every category. 10,000 of them were under the rubble, for example. The rest, that is a majority of these 120,000, are mostly deaths as a consequence of Israel using starvation as a strategic weapon, as well as from lack of medical care for the chronic ill, after they blocked the international food and medical aid to Gaza and targeted its medical facilities. The dead, though, may be many more. The medical journal Lancet presented a study on this subject in July 5th, stressing that, quotations, in recent conflicts, such indirect deaths range from 3 to 15 times the number of direct deaths. Applying a conservative estimate of 4 indirect deaths to 1 direct death for Gaza, it is not implausible to estimate that up to 186,000 or even more deaths could be attributed to the current conflict there. Quotations. That is why the rough estimate for the first year is about killing 2% of the Gaza population. Over which percentage could the International Court of Justice judge safely that it's a genocide on the making, as South Africa, head of a bloc of states of the global South, asked from it? During this first year, Israel also killed about 700 people in the West Bank, 442 in Syria, and since the airstrikes began, over 2,000 people in Lebanon. According to IDF, 17,000 were Hamas fighters and about another 1,000 other Palestinian terrorists, out of which 800 were Hezbollah fighters. That is, even according to IDF, in order to kill 18,000 combatants, Israel feels comfortable and justified to kill an additional 100,000 men, women, and children as side losses. This is the reason the Gaza war has made the last 12 months as lethal as the whole Arab-Israeli conflict since 1948. I don't need to speak any further about Israel destroying 70% of all Gaza homes and infrastructure, the sewage system almost completely, or about almost every Gazan, according to the World Health Organization statement, being ill. Additionally, I want only to say that Israel has also destroyed all 5 water treatment facilities, thus reducing the amount of water available in Gaza by 94% to less than 5 liters per day per person for all uses. That is, less than 1/3 of a single toilet flush. All this have led to 1.7 million people living today in tents amid piles of garbage and human waste, among mountains of rubble and unbearable odors, and of course illnesses. That's why they are all ill. In such appalling condition, only 10 to 30% of the Gaza population has access to soap. Are the USA and the European diplomacy aware of these records? Rest assured, they know much more, since it's Germany, Italy, the UK, and in a lesser degree France, supplying at least part of the defensive systems that Israel makes use of in order to both attain and convince its people that they can strike anywhere with immunity. And it's the USA that keeps supplying Israel with dizzy numbers of missiles and bombs, guided and unguided, of every imaginable size and use, especially the ones penetrating deep under the soil into bunkers, with which it assassinated Sayed Nasrallah and many others among the Hezbollah high command. Of course, this is a case where it is mainly geopolitical interest deciding the Western stance against this so-called humanitarian crisis, which we call genocide. This doesn't mean, though, that they can keep turning a blind eye, accusing everyone fighting for an end to all this, for an immediate ceasefire without any preliminary conditions, for justice and freedom for Palestine, for anti-Semitism. Even the little old Jewish woman with double citizenship, Israeli and German, whom the German police keeps arresting every time she appears on the streets of Berlin alone, bearing a carton with the same words, "Terminate the genocide in Gaza." I heard her speaking at a rally in Athens, and she said, "This is an age of confusion. I am a Jew, but they keep calling me Nazi. They are Germans, but they consider themselves to be the new Jews." Of course, it's obvious that although Israel, according to the Committee to Protect Journalists, managed to kill up to now 125 journalists in Gaza, the last one on September 29th being Wafa al-Wadaini, a 39 years old woman of Palestinian origin working for The Guardian, someone, or rather many people, still keep narrating the Gaza and the Lebanon story, and Marco showed how it's the best iconized genocide in the whole history. The people's mobilization all over the world under very difficult circumstances, also Marco told us a few things about it, the fighting renaissance breaking out of the USA and British university campuses, reliving memories of the struggle against the Vietnam War, a situation which even the Israeli press has named as quotations, a global defeat, the thunderous collapse of Israel's image since October 7th, that's from Haaretz, 6 October this year, cannot but have an influence on Western politics. Netanyahu's far-right government also doesn't seem to have any intention of making things easier for the prevailing Western policy towards Middle East. Its apocalyptic vision, turning Gaza into West Bank and West Bank into Gaza, doesn't go very well down with it. The Israeli plans seem to include Jews resettling, if not the whole of Gaza, because despite the one-year extermination campaign, over there remain still more than 2 million people, at least its northern part, which they have started again clearing out of those of its former inhabitants who keep living in tents among the rubble there. That is also why the IDF's bulldozers have leveled everything left untouched from the bombardments. This, of course, also means Gaza will remain under Israeli military rules if they manage to do it. At the same time, there has been a parallel process in the occupied West Bank, greatly accelerated during the last year. Settlers strengthening their ranks with the addition of lots of the so-called youths at risk, sent from the Israeli administration to the illegal West Bank settlements, ostensibly for an agricultural education treatment against tendencies towards petty criminality, in fact, to join the pogrom against the Palestinian West Bank population, tormented and killed, now with the IDF helping the settlers' violence, resulting in 39 West Bank villages plus their accompanying property being abandoned by the residents, completely abandoned during the last 2 years, the vast majority during this last 1 year, and in the most spectacular land grab since the beginning of the Israeli settlements in the West Bank, eroding further any authority left to the Palestinian Authority concerning the West Bank. Western policies bear, though, also the impact of the 19 July International Court of Justice almost unanimous advisory opinion. I don't want to say anything about it because Jerry, I think, covered everything. Just one thing that, in my opinion, the most important part in this opinion is that it finds Israel obliged to end its illegal military occupation without Palestinian concessions or agreement, as the Fourth Geneva Convention provision establishes that agreements made between an occupying power and an occupied population are invalid. As Amnesty International stated, this opinion is a historic vindication of the Palestinians' rights. At this September UN General Assembly, a large majority of the member states adopted the opinion, and Israel was given a 12-month period to comply by withdrawing from all the occupied territories. Last week, by an even more larger majority, the Israeli Knesset voted against any compliance. The Israeli government and the Israeli government's behavior towards the UN, forbidding their general secretary from entering Israel, IDF shooting against the UN peacekeeping forces in Lebanon, posted there by a UN Security Council mandate, and Netanyahu publicly asking them to leave Lebanon in order to save their lives amidst an Israeli-Lebanon war that has not even been officially declared. Officially, there is no war in Lebanon. It's with Hezbollah, it's a hybrid war. Have obviously much to do with the UN Court's opinion too. Let's take a look in Europe. 3 countries, Ireland, Spain, and Norway, have recognized the Palestinian state. On the other hand, Germany and Austria are playing the card of historical guilt, a very clever card indeed, which makes them the perfect cover for whatever crime the Israeli government is committing. As for France, Macron's call to limit arms export to Israel doesn't signal a French policy shift, as was mostly directed to the USA, who exports arms, while France only defense systems. It was rather a French analog of Kissinger's statement about Israel that it has no foreign policy, only a domestic one. It's the outgoing High Representative of the EU for Foreign Affairs, Josep Borrell, though, who now that he will have left his post by the end of this year, has some very interesting comments to make. Borrell now is asking for targeted sanctions against both Israeli ministers and notorious for violence settlers, while exposing the EU member states as being preoccupied mainly with Ukraine and indifferent towards Gaza. In an interview in Haaretz, August 29th, he said, quotations, "We are strongly committed to the existence of Israel. None of the EU says that Israel should be thrown into the sea. At the same time, we also support the idea that Palestinians have a right for their own state and they have a right to self-determination. These positions do not contradict. We support the right of Israel to defend itself, but like any right, the right to self-defense has a limit, which is the respect for human rights and international law. We agree on the idea of the two-state solution, but we do not act accordingly to advance its implementation. We were reactive at best, passive at worst, certainly not as proactive as we should have been. I must recognize that the EU was never fully invested political capital in resolving the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. We saw with the Venice Declaration back in 1980, but since then the EU has structurally withdrawn from this conflict. The Palestinian-Israel conflict is one of the most divisive issues all over the world, one of the most difficult issues to build EU 27 consensus on. Some members would prefer to focus on humanitarian support at present rather than in political issues. But we are not facing a natural disaster or an earthquake. We need to look for the political roots of the problem. You need to make peace with the Palestinians, not just with the Arab states. Just more humanitarian aid doesn't reduce the number of the people being killed. But even on this level, what we see today is total lack of empathy for the pain of the other in Europe. I think it's a very good confession when you leave your post, having done nothing about all these things that you know very well. And he further admits that in deciding lately some very limited sanctions against the West Bank settlers, the EU was just following the Americans, but even then, he says, in a lesser degree than the Americans, which are known that have done so many things to bring Israel back into the... my time is over, but unfortunately I would like to speak about the Americans, which I left at the end, because I think it's the main factor in this diplomacy thing. What can... Okay. Okay, then if I can talk about the Americans, which I think it's the most decisive in matters of, not the most, the only decisive in matters of Western diplomacy. Let's do it in another. Thank you very much.
I apologize for the cutting. Nantia will continue the last part of her presentation just at the first part of the second session, which is after lunch, but we have to cut it because people need to do Friday prayers.
Ladies and gentlemen, we will adjourn now for the Jummah Salah, which will be performed here on the premises. Some of our leaders have gone to the masajid in the area close by. They will return immediately afterwards. And we will have the lunch immediately after the Salah so that we can start at 2:30 and not 3 o'clock. We still have a message from the Khatib, Dr. Sabri from the Jerusalem, from of course Masjid al-Aqsa. And then we got also footage that want to play, and we also, our last speaker would like to complete her part of the speech on the American complicity in this genocide. So if everybody can just comply, those who are going to perform the Salah, immediately we are in the quad here outside. Sheikh Ibrahim will lead the Jumu'ah, and then of course proceed for the lunch in the building just across where the staircase is. You can, that's going up right opposite us. That is where the lunch will be served for everybody. 2:30, we will reconvene and continue with the conference. Thank you very much.